delighted to welcome everyone to today's webinar, How to Reduce Customer Effort in the Contact Centre. I'm Rachel and I'll be the webinar chairperson for today. We've got a packed agenda for today. We've got delighted to be joined by Peter Massey from Bud. Peter, for people who haven't been on any of our webinars before, would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure, yeah. Bud's a specialist customer experience business, particularly focused on putting in the Amazon growth model. And a number of people may know our book, The Best Service is No Service. I'll refer to briefly later on.
Brilliant. And Sandeep Bogan from Puzzle, delighted to have you on your first webinar with us. For people who aren't aware of what Puzzle does, could you explain what you do within Puzzle?
Yeah, thank you. So Puzzle is previously known as in telecom. We are a pure cloud omni-channel contact center provider, contact center solutions. I'm a lead solution architect, and we work very closely with the innovations team to provide the best service to our customers using the technology that's out there.
Great. Well, thanks for joining us today. So as always, we're taking a recording of today's webinar, which will be available about an hour after the webinar on callcenterhelper.com/recorded webinars. So that if you wanted to share it with your team, it will be available there along with the slides from both our speakers. As always, we've got our chat room running alongside it. We've already got a number of people who are kind of chatting in there. So it's callcenterhelper.com/chat. You just need to put your first name, last name and email address in. And the added bonus is that you can actually download the slides right now. There's lots of information from both Peter and Sandeep, so it's always good to download them while we're going along. And you can download the chat log here. We are running our bottle of champagne or chocolates for the best tip. Got the champagne here. So if you did want to ask a question of any of our panel, use #question, or to share your tips on reducing customer effort, use #tip. So we've been asking in the chat room, how easy is it for your customers to contact you? I know that Alan said, harder now than in the past. Customers expect more, and rightly so, but it's managing the channels and the fact that we're now a 24-hour culture, and even with emails, customers expect a response in minutes, hours, and not hours and days. So I think that's kind of what we were saying before, Peter, about kind of, expectations are higher.
Definitely, yeah. I mean, it's one of those things that you see, I think, both ends of the spectrum and not a lot in the middle. You get an answer within a time scale where you're still there and still in the problem. Or if it's beyond that time scale, which can be 5 minutes, 10 minutes, you kind of don't notice. Particularly I find it with Twitter. I might go back the day after because I don't look at Twitter every 5 minutes. I'll only look at it whilst I'm in the problem.
Yeah, Mike said Twitter has become a go-to for issues. Most companies in the US have Twitter and most respond very quickly. He said he was in a store and got a response while he was still kind of walking around, which is great, Sandeep, don't you think?
Oh yeah, definitely. I've used Twitter a few times too, and I've actually benefited with free products. So it's a little inside tip there for you. I think, as we mentioned earlier, I think the key thing about Twitter is the fact that the history is there for people to see. So unlike a phone call, unlike a web chat where it's a private conversation, the Twitter sphere records everything. So it's a good thing because your history is there. It may be a bad thing if your customer services isn't great and you want a fresh start.
Well, I'm going to kick off our first poll today, where we're asking, do you currently measure customer effort? So the options are yes, not yet, but thinking of doing it, no, and don't know. So I will launch that. Sandeep, I don't know what you're expecting to see. Do you think it is a big thing for call centres?
I think it's quite difficult to measure customer effort because the barometer for customer effort isn't very clearly defined. But I think people are now starting to wake up to it. So I expect to see not yet, but thinking of doing it.
And Peter, if you were a betting man, which one do you think would be coming out?
I think the majority don't. It's interesting because I think there are a number of people who have adopted the philosophy of customer effort, and they've moved, say, from an NPS score about recommendation to an NPS score about how easy was it to deal with us. So it's there's a shift there, but it's not by any means taken over from NPS. I think to Sandeep's point, the measure that we advocate is not an in the instant measure. It's a contact rate per customer per annum. It's how much you're causing customers to get in touch. And certainly with companies like Amazon, they measure contact per order shipped. Those kind of measures are very common in retail. They might not call them customer effort, but propensity to call, for example, in telco, propensity to call in retail is very, very common.
I will share the results. So yeah, both kind of around the middle section. So 44% saying no, 37% saying not yet but thinking of doing it, 17% saying yes, and 2% saying no. Sandeep, I don't know whether that was kind of a shock or what you were thinking of.
Yeah, it kind of was what I was thinking of. I'm shocked that there's not many people measuring it, but it's kind of where we expected it to be.
Okay, we're actually going to go straight on to another poll, just while we're doing it, which is what is your most important metric? It is multiple choice, so you can vote on more than one. So the options are average handling time, net promoter, customer effort, first contact resolution, and service level. Peter, I don't know what you're seeing. People are...
I think within contact center, a lot of people are aiming to measure first contact resolution. Net promoter gets used as a transactional measure rather than a brand measure in that sense. Average handling time, I'll be very interested to see, because straw polls I've done over the last few years, that has dropped away from being the measure on the agent. It's still measured because of the resource planning, but it's dropped away for a lot of people. So I'll be very interested to see what that looks like.
I will share the results, and so 65% of people saying service level, 44% saying first contact resolution, 35% saying average handling time, 25% saying net promoter, and 17% customer effort. Sandeep, I don't know whether that was something that you would guess, or you were, you're thinking that's good.
Yeah, I mean, interesting point there, actually, Peter. Average handle time has always been a metric which people have used for reporting, but not necessarily looking at the customer experience during that. So it's a bit of an interesting one. Service level, again, percentage of answered. People have this perception that actually, if you answer a call quickly, it's a good thing, rather than focusing on the first contact resolution, because actually people will be willing to wait longer as long as they get the answer that they need. So I think it's more around the mindset of statistics to go to management and an internal level, rather than sort of looking at the customer focused side, which is understanding exactly what it is that customers want.
Yeah, absolutely. The service level is an interesting one, because statistically you need to specify a service level percentage within a number of seconds at a maximum wait time of. So pardon the statistical geek in me. But the point of that is you can do a very easy test and learn. Just extend things like your IVR points. Do some tests and learns. Very small samples, but you can find out that people will drop off at, say, 45 seconds in your industry or whatever it is against the relative expectation they've got. So if you can find out where people do drop out and look at the statistics around that, you can really stretch your service level queues and make a big difference to the actual performance.
Well, I've even had customers, contact center managers and supervisors so focused around that they would kind of play about with the priority level. So a call coming in immediately would be at a higher priority. As you were to see it drop past their expected time, they would then reduce the service level, and it would be kind of nothing for them. So it's interesting how people try to sort of fudge those figures.
Oh, well, thanks very much for that. So delighted to hand over the baton now for our first presentation. Peter, I'll make you the presenter.
Okay. There we go. Oh, there we go. That's lovely, isn't it? Application.
Yep. Not sure. Might have lost Peter at that moment. Might take back control and see what happens. Huh. Well, while we're going into technical difficulty, shall we go over to Sandeep and do your presentation first?
Well, yeah, of course.
Yep. I will make you the presenter.
Okay. Okay, the role of technology. So thank you for that introduction there, Rachel. So my job today is just to go through sort of the role of technology, and obviously I've given an introduction of kind of who Puzzle are and what I've done in particular. But having been in the contact center industry for over 10 years, I've seen it kind of evolve from the traditional call center and sort of the subtle changes in the wording, actually. So from call center to contact center as the channels have been introduced. So I've got a bit of background around that. I've worked on smaller contact centers, you know, in places in remote locations like the Ministry of Defence, in loads of different places, being searched before I get to site, to having worked on a large international contact center rollouts with Barclays and other contact centers which are PCI compliant, like the Boris bike system in London. So kind of that's where I'm coming from. And today's focus is going to be around the role of technology to reduce the customer effort. So just on a high level, a Harvard Business Study review showed that 56% of issues of customers were having to re-explain an issue. 57% of people were having to switch from web to phone, and of course each one of these figures tells us something in that. 58% having to expend moderate to high effort levels to resolve an issue. 59% being transferred, not being resolved from where they were. 62% having to repeat contacts to companies to be able to resolve an issue. And actually what we're starting to see is that loyalty probably now is at an all-time low. Consumers are digitally savvy, they've got low patience. Companies have made it a lot easier to switch as well. So if you look at examples like local banks, broadband providers, utility companies, there's so much competition out there that customer effort actually is more important than it's ever been from a consumer's perspective. So what do customers truly want? They want a simple, convenient, low effort resolution to their issues. And actually, in the past, we would have looked at very, very basic customer services departments, usually just a physical department in an area, and that would be in a contact center, usually a call center when it first started out. And that was just for people to call if they had an issue with the organization. There was also a huge disparity between departments, so you'd get sort of the sales team and the support team totally separate. The older attitude used to be, you know, the sales team are the ones that create the issues, and the support teams are the ones that hand out the tissues. That was eloquently put to me by a salesperson many years ago. So from that sort of attitude, we're seeing it move to now the setup, creation of customer hubs. So customers are now creating these hubs, and effectively it's just a way of all organizations, all competencies within an organization working together on customer engagement. So now you've got the sales team, you've got the marketing team, you've got the support team, analysis, change management, all working together to deal with sort of the customer touch points to provide a uniform sort of response to customers. So things to consider when coming through. So for the purposes of today's presentation, we're going to focus on a few key areas. So real-time channels, and we'll talk about sort of the real-time channels. Self-service, the introduction of chatbots, particularly recently, is becoming more prevalent. Channel shifting, which is vastly different to channel switching, which was a big buzzword a few years ago. With the introduction of different channels, people were focused on shifting people away from voice calls because businesses just thought it was very expensive to have voice calls handled. But what we're starting to actually is what we're starting to notice that actually sometimes an email trail requires 5 or 6 emails back and forth to get to a point which actually a 30-second conversation on a phone could have been dealt with. So that's where channel shifting is quite important. Geolocation, how that fits into customer effort, and customer analytics and a single view of the customer, and again, obviously, how that's fitting into that, and we'll go through that as we kind of run through the presentation. So real-time channels to begin with. So to give examples, we have an online retailer which deal with, an online underwear retailer. Now, traditionally, they would have had a call center, so people would have had to phone in with queries about sizes, availability, this kind of thing, if the website didn't have that option there. Now, if you're on a crowded train on your way into work, you may not necessarily want to have a phone call into a contact center to ask about underwear size, for example. So that's where that becomes a bit more sensitive. So by offering a web chat channel, then you're able to meet the customer's need, but obviously be sensitive to their environment as well. So if you imagine customer effort, they don't have to wait until they're home in a quiet room by themselves having to talk about something. They can do it while on a busy train and with other people around. So that's kind of an example where real-time channels, by increasing those real-time channels, you're able to help customers contact businesses. Another example here is first port properties. So by doing a CRM integration, the agent is presented immediately with the history of that customer, so they're able to see, well, what's going on with this customer, how many open cases have they got, what's the nature of their query, and therefore the customer doesn't have to explain the times that they've spoken to the contact center in the last couple of days over various different channels. So by using the CRM integration, we're able to increase the real-time channels, or increase the complexity of the real-time channels to reduce customer efforts. And then the next point is payment requests. So payments actually is a very interesting point. Based on our research, we've noticed that actually mobile payments is becoming more prevalent. And actually in 2016, Visa did a digital payment study, and they found that in between 2015 and 2016, the amount of consumers that are going to mobile devices for payments tripled. And actually, that's 86% of all digital shoppers went mobile. So of all the people that were shopping, 86% of them moved to a mobile device, which is obviously hugely significant and can't be ignored in any way, shape, or form. Interestingly, actually, out of that study, they found that we also found that 74% of British consumers in general are now mobile payment users. And those are people who manage their money or make payments using a mobile device. Actually, interestingly about that study, they also found that the fastest growing rate of mobile banking adoption was amongst 55 to 64-year-olds. So, of course, the old preconceived notion or misconception is that young people are sort of inclined to change across payments to mobile devices isn't always true, and Visa kind of found that out in 2016. With that in mind, it's worth just talking about Puzzle Pay, which is a payment platform that we offer. The key thing here is balancing choice with simplicity. So what you've got there effectively is allowing the customer to choose from a tailored set or a preferred payment option. And now we're seeing people like Apple, Android, Facebook, Samsung all come into the payment industry, and really there's a big uptake in those through their mobile devices. Mobile banking apps like Ping It, where you can transfer money. PayPal, of course, is a hugely popular one, moving away from just the standard credit or debit cards. So the customer's allowed to basically select their own preferred payment method. It allows a payment path to be sort of the minimum number of steps to reduce the effort, so it's as simplistic as possible for the customer. The solution works on any mobile device, so it's device agnostic. It'll work on any device. It works with all major payment options. As I said, payment wallets are becoming more prevalent, digital invoicing, peer-to-peer social apps. So you can make payments through payment apps. WeChat is a particularly popular one in China, I know, and they've introduced mobile payments through that. It acts as one solution over all major channels. So actually, it doesn't matter how your customer's contacting you. It doesn't matter what channel they're contacting you. It's an overarching platform which goes across all the channels. And most importantly, these days, it's PCI DSS compliant. And again, some of the advantages are, of course, the statistics around that. And we'll kind of come into sort of the analytics and the statistics. But the fact that we're able to introduce that into the payment part of that into the contact center is key as well. Another key point here is self-service, so chatbots and virtual assistants. Now, just to kind of reel off a few facts or announcements that happened in 2016. So last year, in March, Microsoft released their bot framework. In April, Facebook opened up Messenger bot platform for bot building. Telegraph announced a prize for bot developers on its own messaging platform. Google stepped up and announced its own Allo messaging and voice-enabled home speaker. And finally, June, Apple opened iMessage to third-party integration and announced the Siri development kit. Now, it took some time to digest what's happening there. And the question, of course, is, was the sudden shift down to the technology companies or the world's biggest technology brands putting their weight behind it? Or was it actually consumer-driven? Because bots aren't a new technology. If you can remember sort of the paperclip in Word, that was introduced some time ago. And of course, calendar invites in Outlook, that's a type of bot. What's actually changed now is that chatbots, which is a version of the bot which are designed to be capable of holding conversations using artificial intelligence. So that means we're able to understand inputs, so that's voice or text, process it, and answer in a conversational format. So Apple's Siri or Alexa from Amazon, those are probably the best examples of this in the real world. So in some instance, live assistants can reduce the incoming interactions to the contact center by up to 20% based on self-service. So a higher mix of emotions. Of course, when there's more complexity based around the contact center, then human interaction is still going to be required. And also just a sort of channel switch there from a live chatbot to an agent is also going to be required there because of the human element involved. But the key thing here is self-service is now upon us. And actually natural language processing and speech recognition are prime examples of this. So by using natural voice, we're able to interact with chatbots and take part in self-service without feeling like it is just a computer at the other side of the phone, which is what consumers are particularly wary of. So that just gives us a kind of a good idea. But the key question is, you've got to ask yourself, in your inbound queue, once chatbots are introduced, or once this kind of technology is introduced, what's going to be left in your inbox to be dealt with? And that's going to be the focus of sort of the human interaction. And as I touched on there, channel switching, it requires a seamless flow of information. So this kind of nice little diagram here just gives you a key point here. Now, in the first slide, I spoke about 57% of customers having to switch from the web to phone. And the biggest frustration these days is customers having to repeat information that they've just given. And so if you imagine 57% having to switch from web to phone, that's over half of the people on a web chat then having to go to a phone. If you imagine the frustration with having to repeat all the information that they did, moving forward, that's going to give them less motivation to choose these other channels, as opposed to just calling in the first place and reducing that effort. The other thing, of course, is 56%, as mentioned in the first slide, are having to re-explain the issue. So if you imagine, you're actually adding friction to the customer journey rather than making it a seamless process there. In order to present a true omni-channel experience, you're going to have to manage the customer journey the same regardless of obviously each one of the channels. So what we're finding is actually, in order to do channel switching, there has to be a much deeper rooted integration in the back-end systems, and that will enable then departments, so cross-departmental information to be passed using these back-end systems, and that's regardless of what channel the customer chooses and regardless of the device. So as we're seeing, there's multiple channels now into the contact center. There's multiple devices that we're using to get through, even though mobile tends to be the one that people are pushing through to. Across multiple channels, where we talked about the customer hub, now all of these departments are working together. And of course, one of the biggest problems amongst all organizations is the back-end systems they're using. So by having that deeper rooted integration to all of those channels, you're able to do channel switching successfully, and of course ultimately you're able to reduce the customer effort, which is what today is really all about. Another key area of reducing the customer effort is voice biometrics. Now, 85% of users are frustrated with existing authentication methods. So effectively, by allowing customers to add further robust layers of authentication of their identification and verification process, contact centers can now carry out ID and verification with much less customer effort and far greater levels of confidence. So effectively, voice biometrics is just the technology used to extract personal voice patterns for a verification of the speaker's identity using just the voice. So the algorithm has got much better over the years, and the two key uses of voice biometrics has got to still be authentication, simple authentication, and fraud detection. Now, fraud detection is more sort of relevant where you've got benefits departments, where you've got insurance departments, where they are just purely flagging issues to say that there could be potential fraud detection, for fraud on those lines. So that's where voice biometrics is prevalent. But if we just look at that, 85% of users are frustrated with existing authentication methods. So by actually having a voice print, and that could be a manual voice print by them saying, this is my name, this is who I am, or a manual one, an automated one, which is to take a call recording, a previous call recording, and use that voice print. That's going to be relevant in the fraud detection sphere, but effectively you're able to reduce identification. The other key thing about voice biometrics is it's here now. If you think about the HSBC "My Voice is My Password," that exists right now. And like I said, given that in fact 85% of people are frustrated with existing authentication methods, voice biometrics has the ability to cut times by about 80%, and that's clearly significant. That's definitely something that the industry is going to be looking at and hoping to bring in. So that's a kind of a key point around voice biometrics. Moving on to geolocation. Now, geolocation is the ability to identify the caller's location as they've come into you. Now, previously, this would be done on landlines, and if you can imagine, on your home phone number, your BT phone, you've got and an 01753 and 0207 number, and that would define where the person calling from. So that was very simple to do. In this day and age, now that we're finding people using more mobile devices, it's getting slightly more difficult. It's still available, obviously, mobile triangulation from carriers. If they look at which are the closest masts, they're still able to identify that. And then I guess the future is going to be based around apps. So contact into the contact center is going to be based around apps. And browser-based location, of course, is a big thing now as well. Now, we have a few examples, actually, with our customers. Affinity Water, which is a utility company, they use geolocation. And the way they use it is they're able to identify if there's an issue in a particular area, then they, on an IVR, they're able to identify customers using geolocation who are calling from those areas and automatically play a prompt pertaining to that particular issue. So if there's a burst pipe, for example, then the moment somebody calls from that area, the first message they hear is, we understand there's an issue in your area with regards to a burst pipe. We're working on it, and you know, we'll give you an update as to when that will be resolved. If you think about customer effort in that particular area, the majority of people who are calling in at that time are likely to be calling there. So for them to just on the outset hear that without having to route through any menu IVR system or anything like that, it's going to reduce the customer effort hugely, and it does actually. Another example is we have a pizza company who have in the past used geolocation, and that's again using a mobile device. The moment they call in, there's one golden number that customers dial into, and based on the geolocation, the organization is able to route them to the local branch to handle that order. And again, from the customer's effort, they don't have to trawl through directories to find their local branch. They don't have to do any of this kind of stuff. It's already done for them. So customer effort is being reduced hugely there. Other examples in the future could be breakdown services. So if you've got a customer who's using a breakdown service, the last thing that they may know is where they are located at that particular time, particularly based on you know, long journeys. If they up the M1, they may not be near an exit, so they may not know exactly where they are. So those kind of things can be particularly useful, particularly for reducing customer effort in the contact center. So again, now that kind of leads us on to the customer analytics and the single view of the customer. Now, a holistic view of the customer, including their payments, is particularly useful because you're able to look at a customer, again, in the customer hub example, as a single customer rather than looking at them in different silos in different parts of the business. It's going to improve customer service levels because you've got the ability to identify why customers are calling you, where their biggest pain points are, how you're going to be able to address those. So that's going to affect customer retention, higher conversion rates, and hopefully it'll lead to overall customer lifetime value. And that's where you can start to be more proactive in understanding why your customers are calling you, how they've been dealt with in the past, and what they like to do moving forward. If you can introduce payments into that as well, then actually what you're starting to do as a business is become a lot smarter about the uptake. So now, where we're looking at a customer hub, the sales team have got motivation to be involved in this. The sales team now have a huge vested interest because they're able to see what is the uptake of the customer and how is that feeding back into the customer's interaction with an organization as a whole. In the past, it's always been, here's a service, let's report on it. Here's a separate billing department, let's report on that. They're not really connected. It's very painful for people to have to do that analysis on the business side. So by having that single view of the customer, holistic view of the customer, you're able to identify and be proactive in that. And again, that's only ever going to reduce the customer effort because they, by being proactive, the customer needs are being met. So hopefully that gives you a good idea about sort of the customer effort and the technology behind it. Some of what we've talked about is in the future. A lot of what we've talked about is current. And actually, that brings us nicely on to the puzzle portfolio, technology portfolio. And this is what we offer today. Now, channels are a key part of what we do. So the queuing and routing engine, the analytics, the recording of each one of these channels is a core of what we do. It's a cloud contact center, pure cloud contact center with high availability, with the various accreditations along the ISO service levels. We have deployed a best of breed approach. So what we don't try to do is reinvent the wheel when it comes to workforce optimization or various other systems which exist, because there's some very good systems out there. So what we do is we have very feature-rich integrations into those, so we can utilize workforce optimization tools, workforce management, which Rachel kind of mentioned earlier, which is becoming a particularly key part of what the contact center is doing. So by feeding into that, by having a direct feature integration into that, we're able to utilize both sets of technology there. Again, in terms of integration, CRM platforms, we're not trying to reinvent the wheel by creating platforms that already exist and exist very well. We create very kind of deep integrations to be able to get the best out of that technology. Self-serve knowledge bases come into it. So where we're talking about chatbots, obviously the back end has to have something which is fed into it. Raw data, voice recognition, speech recognition is a big part of it. Payment, as we've talked about, services, insight, telephony, and training. These kind of fit into the offer, which is what the puzzle portfolio is today, and that's kind of key to the services in what we do, and actually has enabled us, as you can see here, for some of our customers across multiple verticals there to provide that solution. So we leverage technology to reduce the customer effort for these customers, and these are some of the customers. And we actually, I can vouch that we're particularly busy in the solution architects world and the sales world. So we're definitely doing something right. We're starting to have very deep conversations now. So it's not just a case of give us a contact center, standard contact center, that now the requirements of customers is becoming particularly complex now. The environments are very complex, and the requirements now by customers is becoming very complex and very demanding now. So hopefully that gives you a good idea about what it is that we do and how we leverage our technology. And then, Rachel, I guess I'll hand over to you now with any questions.
I think we're going to go to the questions at the end. I think we're going to pass the baton. Right, Peter, I think we've got you back online.
How it goes. Yeah, again, apologies about that. GoToWebinar crashed. So I've got a voice line open in case we need to use it, but I don't know if I'll be able to talk to you. But we'll see how that goes. I'll do the show my screen, and fingers crossed it'll come up.
Yeah, fingers crossed.
There we go. So we should be. No, that's okay.
We can see GoToWebinar. There's the slides. It's a bit dark. Can't quite work out. There we go. Fab.
There we go. Okie dokie. So. Right, thanks very much for that, Sandeep. I'd certainly echo your comment there about knowledge management. One of the things I spend a lot of time talking to people about is getting the knowledge management right, whether you're trying to program an IVR or a bot, or you're trying to start to get an AI application to start learning. If you don't know what customers are asking for and how to give them the answer and the resolution, then you've got a problem. So knowledge management to me is very core to a lot of the customer contact operations we deal with. So I'm going to talk a little bit then about customer effort in the contact center. I referred in the intro to our book, The Best Service is No Service, which was written by a couple of my colleagues in America and Australia, Bill and David. It was launched in 2008. I think the book reached the top of the bestsellers in the Amazon Business Books chart, and it's a very interesting insight into the way in which customer effort arises. I'm going to refer to a couple of the principles of it in a second. So let's go to the next slide, if we can. Interesting. There we go. So briefly about Bud, we're a customer experience consultancy. Obviously worked in a lot of different sectors, there's a lot of different clients, and I'll refer to a little bit about the HMRC case study later on. Our passion, how do we stop doing dumb things to our customers and our people? This is an example of customer effort. This was from an insurance company sending me through a whole series of documents on the same day. In fact, they were all 0 bills. And it's typical of the kind of problem that inside the business we can become numb to because we see it every day, but outside the business, the customers just feel it's dumb, and it damages the brand, obviously. At the end of the day, when we start to look at contact center operations and we start to look at customer effort, it's quite interesting how people have different opinions, particularly in different parts of the business, about why things are happening and what the problem is. And so it's really quite important to try and triangulate what's there. But I always refer back to this single truth: the customers and the frontline staff know. So whatever the technology, it's really, really important to have a look at what a customer's saying, and it's really, really important to involve frontline staff because they have a two-way channel. They can tell you not only what's happening, they can ask questions of customers and help with intelligence, and spend a lot of time switching on the intelligence of frontline staff in contact centres, because if they believe they're being listened to, the level of service that they provide, the morale that's there changes a lot. So it's at the heart of starting to reduce customer effort. What we've seen for donkey's years now is this virtuous circle here of the customers and the frontline staff and what they do and what they know. If you can focus that onto the change programs that you do, and in turn make the change programs deliver operational change such that the customers can see the difference, that's your virtuous circle. And that's what we attempt to do all the time in these kind of processes. Now, in applying the principles of the book, this diagram, you probably look for the numbers 1, 2, 3, 4. It's a fairly complex diagram, but the first point of it is challenging why customers have to call at all. So the first point isn't to make the service great. The first thing is to understand why customers have to get in touch and eliminate the dumb contacts, get back to the root causes of why they're happening and around the organization. Creating the engaging self-service, and then being proactive and opening up the channels to make it really easy to give those great customer experiences. And the listen and act point in number 7 is the one which is about how do you keep feeding back that virtuous circle to make it better and better as time goes by. So what we do see is that quite a lot of organizations will start on that journey. They'll start to understand demand. They'll start to understand why things are happening. But changes of management or changes of focus or new KPI take people off the ball. If you look at Amazon's case of contacts per order shipped, that has been a relentless focus since the start of the business. And it's not something they let go of. It drives their economics and it drives their customer experience. And finding the right KPI and finding the right focus on customer effort is an essential part of what to do. But that continuity, that never giving up. So in Amazon's case, where's my stuff is the biggest reason for contact. It was, it is, and it will be, because that's the nature of their industry. But the level of contact per customer per annum continually drives down and down and down, and that's what they focus on. And secondly is that comes from detail. And I'm always very conscious today that people running contact centers should be also running their websites. It's still a very rare thing that two things are run under the same banner. But if you look at this example here, I do this one quite often, is just looking at the word delivery. If you search on it in Amazon or you search on it in eBay, and what do you get? And in fact, Amazon brings up as the first item the kind of information you're going to want to know about delivery and the correct links to go to. This goes back to knowledge management, understanding what the customer's questions are, predicting what they're wanting, and actually giving them the right answers to what they want. Whereas eBay still haven't cracked that in terms of the listings. And so it's this level of minute detail when you're optimizing websites, mobile apps, which cause the contact that then goes into the contact center. And the joining up of the contact center and the online services is absolutely at the front line of reducing customer effort of what's going on. And of course, the intelligence that you have in the contact center is vital to the people who run the online sites if you don't run them yourself. So very, very interesting to look at the information that you present to them, and I'll show you that in a second. I think the third point I'd bring in is that it's really important to get the message across in your organization that the contact center doesn't create the contact. It can't stop the contact if it doesn't create it. Now, there are some forms of contact it can create, but the majority are created by poor expectations or operational needs somewhere else, or a product development issue, or whatever it might be. So actually, the requirement of a good contact center director is influence outwards into the organization. I often differentiate between the director and the manager in a contact center. The manager is trying to optimize what happens in the contact center. The director is trying to optimize what happens in the business to try and stop too much happening in the contact center at all. So who did create the contact? Who can stop the contact? The leader's role is very much to drive this. So whatever your role in the contact center, have a look at how you address that leadership role of facing into the business and getting a broader front. And it's all about collaboration. Collaborate or else. Now, obviously, if you go to your colleagues with a hairy cat and a machine gun, it's hardly going to do any good. Helping them come to the problem and helping them to understand the problem is part of how we get collaboration to work. The question is how. I'm sure a few of you have seen this Facebook picture. Everybody else wants you to do all the work, and they all stand around thinking it's your problem. And that's the problem that you've got to change. So I advocate two things here: storytelling and data shadows. Now, storytelling is really about telling the story of what happens to customers, and you can derive that information, that story, from all the different sources that you have, whether it's your NPS feedback or whether it's your frontline staff, whether it's other feedback mechanisms that you use. They all tell the same story. At the end of the day, the customer's only got so many issues, and the issue is the question is to get to those issues. So I'll give an example here. This was some work we did for the Cabinet Office, where we were asked to look across the 5 main departments that handle contact. So HMRC, DVLA, transport, health service, etc. These people all said our department is very different from theirs. And when you went into the department, each agency said we're very different from them. And everybody had a view about it. When you simplified it by saying, okay, what do the customers ask you for? Be it via Twitter, in a letter, over the phone, when they walk in. And when you boiled it down, you got down to some very simple things. Where's my money? I don't understand your letter. How do I? And you can imagine that there might be a sub-story to this. So where's my money because da, 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 or I don't understand your letter, letter number X, Y, Z. And it's important to know that sub-story, but you can understand using the customer's words, where's my money, sums up the story very well. It's a great title. And for those of you who have to categorize data, using the words of the customer is a great way of categorizing data such that other people can understand the story behind it, and such that other departments can categorize in the same way without any big discussion. So if you can tell the story behind where's my money, people up and down the organization will be talking the same story, and that has a massive cultural impact on collaboration. And spreading those stories is part of the task that we have in the contact center. So here's an example out of a presentation that HMRC did at one of our events. You can see the way they've coded some of these contacts. And I'll just let you read that for a second. But immediately you can start to guess, without being a tax expert, what's going on in there. I'm not quite sure what a P800 is, but I'm sure that doesn't take too much to find out. But you can start to see the picture. And then if you imagine the story being written up behind, I need to let you know why my tax code is wrong. You can imagine the story behind that and the sub-stories that go with it. And the task is to write up those stories and get those stories to travel. People remember stories. That's how our memories work, how our brains work. And if you can first of all establish the story, you can start attaching the data to it. And that's what we call the data shadow. So the sources that can be used could be myriad. There's from analytics of all kinds, research, feedback, etc., etc. And as I'm sure many of you will recognize in your own business, depending on who owns which source of data, you can get a fight for resources because different people own different sources, think there are different priorities. And by bringing together those different sources to create one view, one story of those customer needs, you can then start to attach all the different sources of data to the one story and start to get some commonality, particularly at board level. The board doesn't want to hear 6 different sets of data. They just want to see one set of priorities. So it's a really simple way of bringing things together. Now, what about data? We could talk forever and ever about the different kinds of data. I'm just going to show you quickly a couple of examples of the way you can bring data together. This, a value irritant grid, we call it, is really designed to have a look at who should act and what's it worth, what's the size of the prize. And you can imagine these percentages of contacts could be in financial terms as well. But the fundamental is the 2 axes, company and customer, the value and irritant in both dimensions. You can see at the top right the value quadrant, where this particular business has decided that these little stories, these are the ones where both the customer and the company want to have a conversation. So a card is lost or stolen. It's a very critical churn point if it's not handled well. It's very upsetting for the customer. It's a place to put people. If we go down to the bottom left, where we've got irritant, eliminating things at root cause, don't automate the problems. So what's happening with my application? You want to get the expectation and the speed of the application down such that you never get those queries, rather than necessarily spending lots of money showing them a tracking mechanism of what's happening to your application. So you can then see on the bottom right, the automation quadrant, these are things where there is a value to the customer, therefore they will work through your automation, as opposed to the top left, where there is no value to the customer and not going to work through your automation. It's going to be a case of simplification, very often the case with regulatory requirements. So this is a really simple way of starting to show the stories and the data shadows, but with a purpose. This is so that you and your stakeholders, your peer group outside the contact center, can discuss what happens and say, what would you like us to do with this? Where should we be spending money on it? What are the priorities? How big is the problem? And we can start to think about this then in financial terms and start to build something which Amazon used to call a Manhattan skyline. These skylines are really, again, another way of attaching data to the stories. So in this case, this is a utility example. You can see down the bottom left, I have been overcharged, I have no supply, I'd like to give you a meter reading. Up above each story, there is a little skyscraper, and the crenellations on that go up and down according to the amount of contact per week that's coming in. And then cunningly, you can see above that, you can see what's the cost of doing nothing, and you can see who owns the root cause, and therefore you've got an instant business case for what should we be doing about these things. And the contact rate, in this case, CPX, it says down the left-hand side, annualized CPX by code, that's the contact per X. So in Amazon's case, contacts per order shipped. In a utility, it might be contacts per customer per annum. So you can imagine whatever that kilometric is in your particular business. But the nature of presenting the story and its data shadow, again, here is designed to cause action. And that's really what one wants to use to get collaboration in order to reduce customer effort. So here's another simplified example of one from what HMRC did. In their case, they were looking at it in levels of contacts. They were looking at the little story, who owned it, and what to do. So you can do some very simple versions of that skyline as well. So again, out of HMRC's story, lessons learned as they put it, getting the data, engaging the front line because they know what's going on. They can explain a lot about these stories. They can help you get underneath what's going on. And particularly when it comes then to root causing, they can do an awful lot of the work rather than employing lots of consultants like us to go and do it for them. Join up, share the accountability with the other parts of the organization. And that's the kind of thing that really starts then to address root cause, really bring down the level of contact, in turn, the level of customer effort, and indeed the cost of operating the center. Now, obviously, the Daily Mail loves to throw bricks at the at HMRC. Personally, I feel very sorry for them. They have a fantastic set of people working extremely hard. You can see here Martin Seller, who was the head of contact elimination for HMRC. In the period at the top here, reduction of calls by 10 million in a set year, 15 million calls diverted through self-service. The reduction in reassurance calls by changing the wording on letters, you can see the size of the differences here. Elimination of 650,000 calls from other government departments. So really understanding why the calls are coming in, starting to really engage the organization to address the problems. These can make massive differences to what's going on. So final few thoughts. Telling stories people can remember. This is the way our brains work. Bring the information to the decisions. Design the decision making using the data shadows that with it. Think about presenting the cost of not acting. So in other words, if you say it's going to cost us this much to do X or Y or Z to get help from other departments, that's one thing. If you show them how much is already being spent in the business and that acting is going to save that money, you'll find a difference in the attitude. Again, it's just the psychology of it. And be very, very clear, the contact center can't stop the contact. If you haven't got that story running in your contact center with your colleagues outside the contact center, they're always going to blame you. The contact is always your problem, which isn't actually the case. So that's really all I want to say. Back to you, Rachel.
Brilliant. Thanks very much for that, Peter. A lot of information, a lot of interesting bits for, I know that I found it quite interesting. So we've got some top tips. We probably will run out of time, but I think if everyone's happy to kind of continue on past 2 o'clock, obviously the audience, if you do have to drop off, then you can catch up on the recording. But I just thought I'd warn everyone to start with. So we've had a few opinions. I know we did a poll earlier about metrics, and Alan said AHT is important from a call management point of view, but we found this doesn't run in line with call quality and first contact resolution. And Mike kind of said, all great points. If the agents are properly trained, properly coached and given the tools they need, AHT will work itself out. And Alan, obviously, after the champagne, I need AHT from a planning and forecasting point of view, but try not to use it as an agent metric. Sean, I'm just going to whiz through these ones just so that we've kind of gone through this. I use AHT to get an idea of which agents may need some additional help in resolving calls efficiently. However, it's not a KPI. So we'll go back on, that was just to get over the ones after the poll. Jenny said, our stats and customer experience improved when we introduced an automated system to deal with basic reception calls. Sandeep, I don't know whether you agree with that or what your thoughts are on that. Oh, I think he's actually on mute at the moment, so we'll continue.
Oh, sorry about that. Yeah. I'd say so. Automating is actually going to deal with basic reception calls. If you think about sort of the history of that, traditionally in the old days where there was somebody standing against the wall on the switchboard and they'd be grabbing 2 lines and pushing that through, to then develop that into now a switchboard in a contact center environment. And actually, as that started to develop now, where you've got voice recognition systems which are providing contact center solutions, with the ROI so good, it's very rare that you'll get people who still have reception calls being handled by people. I think automated services are definitely the way to handle that.
Great, thanks for that. We've had I've missed a few. Mike said, our big push recently has been how-to videos via YouTube. We've seen a decline in phone calls using this channel. Peter, I don't know, have you seen that with YouTube how-to videos?
Yeah, very powerful. I mean, HMRC produced a lot of videos. I know Virgin Media in their early days of their social handling, the social team was just, iPhone videos, very simple. I've used it lots actually with cars. I'm a bit of a petrol head, so if you want to know how to change the light bulb on a certain car or Bluetooth your phone to a Fiat 500 or whatever, you just Google it, then you'll find all sorts of people all over the world who just do it for a laugh, and it's fantastically useful.
I know British Gas did a lot of videos, including kind of how do I read my meter and things like that. So, things that might have taken a phone call actually have been taken away from the call center queue. So really good. Just in case anybody needs to drop off, will end the official webinar, but we'll carry on with some questions afterwards. If you could put in the chat room in 1 or 2 words, what did you like best about today's webinar? That would be great. And just a reminder that there will be a replay later on today and slides from the speakers. So I'll officially say thank you to both of our speakers for the moment. Peter Massey from Bud, thank you very much for joining us today.
Thank you.
And Sandeep Bogan from Puzzle, thank you also for joining us.
Thank you, thanks.
So if you do need to drop off, please do. Otherwise, we'll continue on with our top tips. So yes, Charlie said, don't respond to an email with an email. We have seen an uplift in CSAT and NPS with a clear correlation with calling customers as a response to an email. Sandeep, I don't know what your thoughts are on changing channels.
Yeah, I guess it kind of, I covered it in the slides, is channel switching now is kind of quite prevalent, but again, it does depend on the customer's preferred method of contacting you. I know that with emails, if you're working and you're at work and you can't talk, emails are a very good method of communicating with an organization and doing it at your own leisure as well. So I think that's going to be relevant in some instances, particularly, as I mentioned, sometimes it takes 3 or 4 emails to get to a 10-second, 20-second conversation. So I think that is relevant, but of course it must be, you have to look at what the business requirement is, what the consumer's preferred method is as well.
Thank you. So Mike's asked a question. In relation to reducing caller effort for those customers that you have their information for already via previous calls, contacts, registrations, do you have customers provide that information every time, have them verify by collecting it from them, or have them verify it by reading into them, keeping in mind PCI? Peter, I don't know what your thoughts are on that.
Yeah, I think it's an interesting area because I know somebody touched on it with biometrics earlier on, is that it depends how you implement this stuff as much as what it is. So I'm a great believer, first of all, in triage. So the first thing that you do before you take somebody through PCI is to triage what the call's about, because if the call's not about something that affects their record, they've got a general inquiry of some kind, you skip the PCI and give them the answer to the question. So you save yourself a lot of time by doing that. Secondly, is if you do use something like biometrics to make it simpler for them, then you've got to think about the process behind it. I had a horrendous experience with one of my favorite companies, First Direct, where they continually tell you that you have failed the security test. And I said, no, I haven't failed the security test. Your system doesn't know who I am. That's a different thing. And you get into this debate about who you are and what you are and all that kind of thing. And so it's very important about this kind of stuff being done correctly. I've not come across anybody actually being able to read out or short circuit the PCI. The compliance team that you've got in your business will tell you what you're going to have to do. What I have seen is a lot of competitive advantage by the compliance team really understanding what they have to do and what they don't have to do, and really simplifying it as much as they possibly can. And then that way, if you triaged, you do have to go through it, then great, you do it in the simplest possible way. And there are, I think, many organizations, you listen to the whole rigmarole that you've got to go through when really that's not relevant at all. And just one final point, just to channel switching that somebody was saying before, is what is quite useful. There are all sorts of ways of pushing information to customers so that they can tick and acknowledge on record that they've read the compliance statement and so forth. So I've certainly seen some interesting applications for that in financial services, whereby you don't have to read out the script, which is endless and really drives people nuts.
Thank you. Sandeep, I'm sure you have thoughts on this question.
Yeah, no, definitely, and I think actually Peter's kind of covered it. Really, it all depends on the business process. Now, providing the customer information, if you've already got it, then you don't have to provide it every time. I mean, ultimately, having an understanding of who's calling you and why they're calling you doesn't mean you have to necessarily repeat that, nor does it mean you're going to get it right every time. You know, somebody might have an outstanding query with an organization, call in about something totally different. It doesn't automatically mean because of the information you hold, you're going to assume that it's about that particular issue. All we're doing here is reducing the effort by acknowledging and understanding some of the reasons why somebody's called you before, and also, you know, moving forward, trying to make that simpler. If somebody calls you about something totally different, then, you know, PCI it wouldn't even come into the question, because ultimately all you're going to say to them is, hi, Mr. Jones, are you calling about X? And if it's very clear they're not, then you would just move on with sort of the reason why they are calling. So I think it's key to understand that actually what we're not trying to do is solve every single thing immediately by taking the information that you have and presenting it in a way that causes you to sort of breach PCI. What you're effectively trying to do is reduce the effort by having the information up front, by saying, yes, we know that you spoke to us 3 times yesterday, once in a call, 3 times on a web chat, and we're aware of what's going on. And that's it. That's all you're doing, reducing that effort.
Thanks. So we've got 2 tips before we finish. Charlie said, create individual customer effort scores for your top 10 contact reasons by volume, then target individual contact reasons with the worst customer effort scores, and try and see how you can make the related processes more efficient through journey mapping. And finally, Mike said, oh, sorry, Peter.
Oh, no, I think it's a really good tip, yeah.
Yeah, definitely.
Well, I vote for the champagne, yeah.
Fab. And Mike said, we have technology that looks up the customer's phone number in the CRM and asks if they're calling about the same product we show in order to reduce the number of levels in the IVR, which I think is, you know, great use of technology.
Definitely.
Fab, so that's all we have time for. Thank you very much if you stuck after 1 o'clock or 2 o'clock even. Silly. If you haven't already, could you put in 1 or 2 words, what did you like best about today's webinar? As I mentioned, the replay and slides will be available in about an hour. So this is our last webinar before the summer. We are back on the 14th of September, so lots of time to register for those webinars. And I'd say thank you very much to both our speakers today, to Peter Massey from Bud. Thank you for joining us.
You're welcome. Enjoyed it.
Thank you. And to Sandeep Bogan from Puzzle, thank you very much for joining us.
No, thank you. It was a very fun experience.
Brilliant. And thank you to our audience. We have a survey if you could complete it after you've ended the webinar. So thank you. Bye-bye from me. Bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.